still dominating the front pages. That's the Gregg Wallace story. The Mirror focuses on his apology, saying, "I'm sorry." The Express also says Gregg is sorry for any offence caused with his first apology, while The Sun sums it up by simply saying boiling point. Now, Jenna, I think you're the only one on the panel that's actually been on MasterChef before.
Yeah, I've been on MasterChef twice, and back in the days when I was a BBC executive, I was actually in charge of MasterChef for quite a few years. And I think that my reflection on all of this is, number one, I don't think it merits being the lead story on the news at a time when in the Middle East we're seeing footage of children being carried out of bombed buildings. And I just think on Sunday night, the BBC put the Gregg Wallace story first on the news. And I just think that that's ridiculous. Let's get things in proportion. I know Gregg Wallace extremely well from his previous life when he was a fruit and vegetable salesman before he was a top TV star. Now, obviously, the big news today is there are all these shows with him in, and people are saying, should they still be broadcast? Now, reflecting back on my days as an executive, I would say most definitely should be broadcast, because if they're programmes in which people competed and a lot of love and hard work went into them, not just from the competitors and the other people on the programme, but from the production teams, I don't think you should take a programme off because Gregg Wallace is in it, because we all know now enough about Gregg Wallace to last us a lifetime.
Or the allegations against.
The allegations. Yeah. Now, the thing about Gregg Wallace is that he comes across on television as the voice of working class, you know, I'm a geezer. And I think the BBC have used him so much because they're absolutely desperate to appeal to that audience, to take some of that audience from ITV.
Yeah.
So they've used him and used him and used him. You could say they've used him too much. As to whether his apologies are enough, I think the fact of the matter is Gregg Wallace is one of those characters that I doubt now that he really realises what he's done wrong over the years.
Or is accused of doing wrong.
Or is accused of, but having worked with him,
yeah,
I can say, Charlene, he is extremely aggressive. I mean, I don't even have to allege that. He's extremely aggressive, and when I was a competitor on the 2 times I was on MasterChef, he really goes for you because he's trying to drive the pace of the show. But I think to a lot of people, that would seem like bullying.
Now, when the government obviously put their tuppence in yesterday, they waded into the row either. Do you feel as though that's something they should have done?
I mean, it's always a strange thing when you I always think of it's like, you can tell when there's a sea in the storm of, like, a cancellation wave is coming.
Yeah.
Do you know what I feel with Gregg Wallace? There's this, like, cancellation wave where he's now the dominant topic on our news, and now government has waded in. I do find it strange that the government has waded into Gregg Wallace and made him kind of the figurehead of all of this, when actually I think really the inspection or the analytics should go to underneath that is, why were these women ignored? They made complaints years ago, over and over. There are historical complaints about his alleged behaviour. And yet, right now, we're just talking about Gregg Wallace, not how the system let these women down.
So I think, and I think you'll find the allegations, his behaviour was allowed to, his alleged behaviour was allowed to continue because he was a really important person in the way the programme was constructed. And they couldn't see a way to change it.
But then you sort of, to pick up Ida's point in terms of this is, could be seen as a wider issue in terms of women being believed when they bring issues forward. What do you make of that, Kelly?
I just think it's wearisome, because we've heard this story repetitively over and over again, where women and men are isolated in organisations where the people at the top are not listening to those that are underneath them, and where you get situations where they feel like they can't be heard, and that their opinions are not valued enough to actually have action taken. And I think that's the important part, the action taken on your complaints. Women are so brave, in particular, to come forward and even say what's happening within a workplace. You've got fear of losing your job, fear of other people not supporting you. So I think that it's a great shame that we're still having to repeat the same story.
You know what?
You have There's some figures from Safeline says around 80% of women affected by sexual harassment do not report it. And situations like this where you see that potentially people have come forward and, as you say, weren't perhaps not listened to, that doesn't help those figures.
No.
And we shouldn't be discouraging women from coming forward or men from coming forward. We should be encouraging them. But we did go to the BBC and they said that they take any issues that are raised with them seriously, and they have robust processes in place to deal with them. Where an individual is contracted directly by an external production company, we share any complaints or concerns with that company, and we will always support them when addressed. And the apology, the
first
statement,
one or the second one?
The statement that Gregg Wallace gave originally, he just sort of said that I've worked with over 4,000 contestants of different ages, all walks of life. There have been 13 complaints in that time, but all I can see in the newspaper is these complaints come from a handful of middle-class women of a certain age. But he's since apologised for that and said he wasn't in a good headspace, but he's taken some time out while the investigation is underway.
Can I say really quickly to end, the way out of this mess for complaints to be heard is if we're going to have highly competitive shows for a lot of money where a lot's at stake, you need to have on set, during the filming, the recording or the live show, someone who's looking out for the contestants, someone who's watching all of this and so on. I mean, you have intimate coaches on film sets now. You need something like that for reality
And that's
shows.
coming from one of the most experienced women in telly who's worked on these shows. So it'd be good that people listen to you, Janet.